My wife Eleanor and I are both well-known attorneys in the capital. She is a legal beauty in the financial world, while I shine uniquely in divorce litigation. All these years, our relationship has been steady. Our careers complement each other, and we're hailed as a model couple in the profession. Everything changed at a class reunion when Eleanor ran into her college dream lover, Marcus. These days, he drives luxury cars and lives in a mansion, the very picture of someone who's winning at life. Yet, just as everyone was fawning over him, he suddenly began talking, right there in public, about the humiliation of being cheated on. It was so tragic, even the walls were about to cry. Even Eleanor got swept up in his emo wave. She almost wanted to throw him a big, warm hug right then and there. The real shock came later. Marcus bypassed me, paid a hefty retainer, and hired my wife as his personal divorce attorney. Every day, they'd shut the office door and worked late into the night. When Eleanor herself began to feel it was inappropriate and asked whether a colleague could take over, I closed the door on the two of them and flatly refused. How could we? The man had already paid. After all, I hadn't planned on attending Eleanor's class reunion. Unfinished work had me set on pulling overtime. Besides, at reunions, it's perfectly normal to bump into an old flame and reminisce. My presence would only make things awkward. Eleanor giggled and teased. Attorney George thinks only about work, not his wife. Yet still makes it sound so nice. No wonder you're the firm's golden poster boy. Everyone agreed to bring their plus ones. It's all about showing off our wonderful new lives. No unresolved feelings, I promise. Come with me, will you? I laughed. The work wasn't that urgent anyway, so I changed clothes and left with her. Little did I know, those words would prove prophetic. At the reunion, we really did run into Eleanor's ex, Marcus. Back in college, they'd been the perfect campus couple. When they graduated, Marcus went straight to work, while Eleanor pursued grad school. They say graduation season is breakup season. Distance and time did the rest, and Marcus soon found a new girlfriend. Rumor had it she was the boss's heiress. Whenever Eleanor mentioned that relationship later, all she'd say was, "Everyone has their own path." Still, how could an unattainable first love not leave a trace of regret in her heart? Marcus was on the thin side. A slightly pale face held an optimistic smile whose authenticity was hard to gauge. His manners were refined, but he came alone. A curious classmate asked why. After all the talk about bringing spouses, he hadn't brought his partner. Marcus just smiled without answering. I glanced at Eleanor. She was happily chatting with a friend and even turned to give me a carefree smile, no hint of emotion in her eyes. After a few rounds of drinks, the atmosphere grew lively. Some exchanged pleasantries and offered job referrals. Others swapped business cards with practiced ease. By our 30s, everyone knows the rules of the game. Those old bonds of classmates and the single word spouse have become the perfect lubricant for trading resources. Only Marcus sat alone in a corner, looking slightly ill at ease. Having lived off others for years, these conversations were probably foreign to him. Someone walked over with a glass of wine and joked. I heard Marcus married a rich heiress, driving fancy cars and living in a mansion, a real winner at life. Don't forget us wage slaves when you strike it rich, okay? By the way, why didn't you bring the missus tonight? Marcus stayed silent for a while, then drained his glass. His eyes reddened, and he spoke in a hoarse voice. I probably can't be of much help to anyone, he sighed. I'm planning to get a divorce soon. Chapter 2. The classmate had meant his remark as nothing more than polite small talk, yet the moment Marcus replied, an awkward look crept over his face. Sorry, he muttered. I didn't realize you all. The private room fell gradually silent, and to everyone's surprise, tears spilled from Marcus's eyes. With a sour, self-deprecating smile, he said, In the end, it's my own lack of ability. I've no one else to blame. Someone passed him a drink, and Marcus started telling his story in bits and pieces. It was the usual sad drama. His father-in-law looked down on him. His wife bossed him around like a servant. All the family assets were in her parents' hands. And at work, he was treated like a free laborer. No pay, all work. The worst part? He came back from a business trip and caught his wife cheating with her personal trainer. Not only did he fail to stand up for himself, but the guy beat him up and sent him straight to the hospital. It was the kind of story that could make anyone tear up just hearing it. Indignation flared around the table. Who could stomach that kind of humiliation? Outrageous, one classmate exploded. Another clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Listen, man, file for divorce today. And tomorrow I'll take you to a club, book a VIP suite, and line up some hot young models. We only get about 30,000 days on this planet. Live it up while you can. A third chimed in with a mocking lilt. Exactly. Our straight A genius, with degrees and talent to spare. Why keep living under their roof? If you don't ditch them, aren't you just a spineless turtle? Right on cue, someone dragged Eleanor and me into it. Don't Eleanor and her husband run a firm? With a gold-plated lawyer right here. What's there to fear? Don't just divorce. Strip them for every last cent. Marcus's eyes lit up, his mood visibly steadied. I turned to Eleanor. Her face remained calm, though her hand tightened slightly in mine. In a low voice, she said, "My husband specializes in divorce work. If you need advice, you can talk to him." The air grew thick. Marcus frowned in thought, then asked, "I've long heard of Attorney George's reputation. Could I trouble you for some help?" I sighed inwardly. His case was crystal clear and all too common. A wealthy heiress might be hopelessly in love, but her parents stay stone-cold rational. Many elite families play it the same way. They act open-minded, no need for a live-in son-in-law, no demand the kids take their surname, even offering the newlyweds some startup cash. Yet every asset remains locked under parental control, so they can sweep the husband out the door at any moment, cost-free. Every step is legally airtight. Choosing my words carefully, I laid out the facts. Legally speaking, I concluded, even though she cheated, you're unlikely to get much property in the divorce. Marcus's jaw dropped. I pointed to the car key by his hand. The house, the car, everything's in your father-in-law's name, right? You should focus on a labor suit. If she holds no assets herself, a divorce case will leave you with next to nothing. If we can claw back the wages they owe you, that's already a win. From there, we can discuss whether to negotiate for maximum gain or keep quiet so that money doesn't get labeled marital property. Otherwise, you might walk away with nothing. I hadn't even finished when Marcus's expression suddenly darkened. He fixed me with a heavy stare. So, Attorney George, after I've worked myself to the bone for the Lynn family all these years, your advice is that even after she cheats, all I can hope for is my back wages? I was surprised by how bluntly he summed it up, but I still nodded. The power elite always front-load their legal planning, I said. It's nothing out of the ordinary. Someone nearby muttered a curse about capital. Another whispered pity for Marcus. Marcus ignored me and turned his gaze on Eleanor. Eleanor, is that what you think too? Eleanor hesitated, then let out a quiet sigh. With her experience, she understood the scenario perfectly, and sure enough, she kept silent. Marcus gave a string of harsh, mirthless laughs. He stood, pulled on his jacket, and, with a brusque nod, declared, "I might not be as accomplished as Attorney George, but I've gone through hell and high water, fought my way through the business world at home and abroad. I'm forged in iron, a real tough guy. I've done my stint in legal departments too. Every law you know, I know. And what you don't, I still know. No one understands the law better than I do. I'm not about to wag my tail and beg for a pitiful paycheck like some spineless cur. If that's the master plan from a famous divorce lawyer, then I don't need it. Even if it means a scorched earth fight. Fish dead, net torn. I'll make them pay the price." Chapter 3. Because of Marcus's outburst, the reunion broke up early. The restaurant was a fair drive from our place. Even on empty night roads, it still took close to 20 minutes. Eleanor rode in silence in the passenger seat. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her head bowed, brows tightly knit. The look she wears only when a case turns truly thorny. Anyone would feel a few ripples after a night like this. I could understand that much. Back home, I went straight to the study to finish some work. This time, Eleanor didn't follow me as she usually does, and I thought nothing of it until a sudden crash of shattering glass came from the living room. I stepped out to find Eleanor standing before the wine cabinet. Red wine splashed across the floor like a crime scene stain. I frowned and snapped, "That shaken up?" Her hand, poised over the shards, froze. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus," I said, keeping my answer short. Eleanor pressed her lips together. Annoyance flared in me. I wasn't the only one with feelings tonight. Marcus's parting tirade had left me plenty exasperated. I reminded her in a low voice. "Eleanor, I said I didn't plan to go. You insisted. And you were the one who invited Marcus to ask me for advice. She looked up. Tear tracks still glistened at the corners of her eyes. Her voice quavered. Yes, but George, did you have to put it so harshly? For an instant, I genuinely wondered whether she meant the words I'd said to Marcus or the ones I was saying now. Dabbing her eyes, she went on. George, you're always so rational, an outside observer who spots a dead end at a glance. But did you ever think about how Marcus feels? His marriage is already a misery. Why rub salt in the wound? Don't you have any compassion? I let out a short, incredulous laugh. Years of courtroom reflexes sent my tongue ahead of my brain. Eleanor, get this. I'm not the one who ruined Marcus's marriage. Instead of lecturing me about pointless sympathy, maybe tell him that a wise, cultured person leverages outside forces to reach his goals. If he knew how to use resources, he wouldn't be where he is. And since you handle high-end asset protection and legal planning every day, you of all people know the drill. What? Never thought the same tactics might be used on your ex? Eleanor's face tightened. She clearly hadn't expected such bluntness. Honey, that's not what I meant. I curled my lip. Then what do you mean? Do you think one marriage license entitles him to generations of family wealth? Or that he can sway a judge with sob stories in court? Eleanor, what exactly are you angry about? She stayed silent for a long time, then shook her head. I watched her wrap each shard in paper, mop up every drop of wine, and make the living room pristine again. Only then did she lean into my arms and whisper, I'm sorry, honey. Everything you said was true. I was too emotional. I just felt a little sorry for him. But in the end, every choice he made was his own. It's on no one else. Chapter 4. I didn't fall out too badly with Eleanor over this. First of all, she had already recognized her mistake. Instead of acting stubborn, she offered a sincere apology, and that was enough. Secondly, I'm a realist. If two people can get along, that's what really matters in a relationship. There's no need to make a fuss over things that aren't fundamental. Marcus was a part of her life before I ever came into the picture. No matter how they eventually broke up, those shared experiences they once had wouldn't change or simply vanish. Perhaps things have changed, and people too, but memories, when weathered by time, become something precious. And I allow Eleanor to keep that kind of preciousness. After all, humans are emotional beings. Even with objects, the longer you use them, the harder it is to let go, let alone a lover with whom you once shared mutual affection. If I were in Eleanor's shoes today, I probably wouldn't be able to stay stone-hearted either. Besides, Marcus does evoke some sympathy. Not to mention, he graduated from a top university and had a promising future ahead of him. From a perspective of empathy, I completely understand how it feels to live under someone else's roof and be treated like a burden. It's frustrating and humiliating. Honestly, I even admire his willingness to go down in flames if it meant dragging others with him. That kind of all-or-nothing resolve, it speaks to a part of me too. When I first entered the legal field, I had no say in what cases I handled. Whatever landed on my desk, I just focused on doing it well. Later on, as I advanced in my career and began to earn a voice, I gradually steered myself onto the path of a divorce lawyer. That said, before things truly reached the point of no return, I believe every relationship deserves to be taken seriously. Eleanor is no exception. She's attractive, gentle in nature, and an excellent cook. Even though she's just past 30, her figure is still well-maintained, elegant curves, and a slender, supple waist. By conventional standards, she's very much my type. So, as of now, this marriage is still worth preserving. Life moved forward steadily, without any dramatic waves. Eleanor and I continued with our work. If either of us got off early, we'd sometimes catch a movie together, or she'd cook us a nice dinner. Marcus felt like a side quest that had briefly popped up in a video game. Left alone, it quickly disappeared again. The next time I heard anything about him was about half a month later. It happened during a small gathering of friends, and one of them happened to be a classmate of Eleanor's. The classmate suddenly brought him up. He and his wife have been fighting pretty badly lately. I heard his father-in-law found out about one of their arguments and slapped him in the face in a meeting room. In front of everyone. That's just humiliating. Oh, and Eleanor, he said something in the group chat about you and your husband being cold and distant. What was that about? Didn't he randomly start threatening George that night for no reason? I froze, then looked up at Eleanor. She was blanching vegetables. Upon hearing this, she paused to think. then opened her phone and handed it to me. She pressed her lips together and said, "He tried to add me a few times, but I didn't accept." I glanced at the screen. Marcus had sent 5 friend requests. The first was the default system message. The second one read, "This is Marcus." The third, "I have something I want to ask you." Clearly, Eleanor had ignored the first 3. So the fourth message read, "Is this how all lawyers act? So arrogant and self-righteous." Still, Eleanor didn't accept. The most recent message said, "I had a stress reaction that night. Eleanor, please apologize to Attorney George on my behalf." I looked at Eleanor and asked, "Are you not going to respond?" Eleanor shook her head and said, "No need." I paused to think, then I tapped reply under Marcus's last message and typed, "No apology needed. George here." I thought that would be the end of it, but a few days later, the law firm received an unexpected visitor, Marcus. Chapter 5. A guest is still a guest, even if uninvited. It's only right to receive them. When I returned to my office after finishing a meeting, he was standing in front of the wall of medals just outside the door. That wall displayed the law firm's history, introductions of practicing lawyers, and several certificates of honor. Marcus stood there, head slightly tilted, eyes scanning the wall from top to bottom. Eventually, his gaze froze on a specific section. It was the partner profiles page. Eleanor's photo was displayed in the most prominent spot. I stood behind him for several minutes before he finally snapped out of it. I got straight to the point. "Mr. Miller, what brings you here today?" He smiled at me politely and said, "Attorney George, you're a smart man. Can you guess why I'm here?" I frowned. This is a law firm. If Mr. Miller came here, it must be for a legal case. Surely you didn't just come by for a sightseeing tour, did you? The smile in his eyes slowly faded. Inch by inch, he said, "Yes, but let me ask, are all divorce cases here exclusively handled by Attorney George?" I leaned back into my chair and calmly sized him up. Marcus was dressed in a finely tailored designer suit. His hair was neatly styled, his expression composed. The gold-rimmed glasses rested just right on the bridge of his nose. Compared to the dejected man that night, this Marcus carried himself with poise and confidence. I let a slight smile curl at the corner of my lips. Divorce isn't that complicated. The facts are usually clear, and the case. Every lawyer on that wall you saw earlier is more than capable. He stared into my eyes and asked, "What about Eleanor?" I raised my hand and gestured toward the hallway. "Eleanor's office is across the hall, but she's in a meeting right now. You'll have to wait a bit." He smiled. "Thanks, Attorney George," Marcus said, adjusting his glasses, "but I've already scheduled an appointment at the front desk at 4:30. Eleanor returned to her office. The receptionist had probably notified her in advance, because when she saw Marcus, her expression remained neutral. She came over to me first and said, "Honey, wait for me a bit. We'll leave at 5 sharp." I nodded. We had a movie planned for 6 o'clock. Marcus followed Eleanor into her office. To protect client privacy, it's standard practice to close the door during consultations. I noticed Eleanor hesitate briefly, then chose to leave the door slightly ajar. Low voices drifted over. It was mostly Marcus talking, with Eleanor occasionally asking a question. I wasn't interested in eavesdropping, so I took the opportunity to review my work. At 5 o'clock, the office system ding-talk sent its usual clock-out reminder. I looked up. Across the hall, they were still talking. Colleagues started to leave one by one. The receptionist came over kindly and asked if I needed dinner ordered for working late. I smiled and shook my head. "No need. I'll be leaving soon." By 5:30, I checked my watch. Most of the staff had already left. Sometime during that interval, the office door across the hall had been shut. Marcus's cheerful laughter echoed from inside. On an otherwise quiet floor, it sounded particularly jarring. At 5:40, I packed my things and left for the cinema. Eleanor didn't show up. But during the movie, my phone kept lighting up with calls and messages. Annoyed, I switched to airplane mode. Finally, silence. After the credits rolled, I followed the crowd toward the exit and spotted Eleanor standing there, scanning the crowd until her eyes locked on me. She rushed over, her voice anxious and flustered. "Honey, I didn't mean to miss it. I lost track of time and couldn't reach you." I hurried over, but they said I was 20 minutes late and wouldn't let me in. I had no choice but to wait outside for you. There was a faint smell of cigarette smoke clinging to her. I frowned and cut her off. "Let's go home first." Chapter 6. Eleanor took Marcus's case. She brought it up with me as soon as she got home, carefully saying, Marcus wants to hire me to represent him in this case. He told me everything that's happened these past few years. That's why I missed the movie. He's actually had a really rough time. He's worked hard and kept his head down for years, thinking it would earn him his father-in-law's respect. But in the end, she added, but honey, if you're not okay with it, I can decline. As she spoke, she stepped a little closer to me. That's when I caught the smell again. I couldn't help but say, you reek of smoke. Eleanor froze for a second, then quickly explained, Marcus is in a really bad state mentally. He smoked 2 cigarettes. I wanted to stop him, but seeing him like that, I just didn't have the heart to say anything. She said, I'll go take a shower now. 2 days later, a girl from the admin department came by with a stack of client contracts for stamping. I glanced casually. Marcus's contract was on top, but the representing attorney section was still blank. I asked, was this case signed already? She said, Attorney Eleanor said the signature will be filled in later, she explained, then added, but the client's already paid the legal fees. I nodded. That afternoon, Eleanor came by to talk to me directly. She even brought a tablet loaded with background materials on the case. Her tone was serious as she said, honey, we can't afford to let Marcus's situation drag on any longer. We need to cut through the mess like slicing the Gordian knot. I replied, Eleanor, I didn't know you were not just a lawyer, but a magician too. She blinked in confusion. What do you mean? I chuckled and said, Marcus's case. All the real estate is under his wife's parents' names, and he's been working for his father-in-law's company all this time without receiving a single cent. But actually, that's lucky. If he had been paid, now he'd have to hand over half of it. I went on. So he's offering a large sum just to hire you for a case like that? Doesn't that say something? That maybe you've got a little magic up your sleeve? Eleanor's face turned pale. She looked at me with a wounded expression and said, honey, I haven't signed it yet. If you're really not okay with it, I'll pass it off to another colleague. She clung to my arm and said, trust me, okay? I know what I'm doing. I promise it's just work. I smirked. See? At first, it was, I can say no. Now, it's only if you really object. The shift in tone says it all. And of course, the premise is that I have to be the one who really objects. I waved my hand and answered nonchalantly, relax, I was just kidding. He already paid. If the paperwork's ready, sign it. In any case, it brings money into our firm. Marcus started showing up at the law firm regularly. At first, he'd still greet me politely, sometimes even going out of his way to say I could sit in on the meetings with Eleanor if I had any concerns. After I turned him down a few times, he stopped greeting me altogether. He would simply nod from a distance and walk straight into Eleanor's office. I looked up. The glass door across the hall was always firmly shut. Faint murmurs of laughter drifted through now and then, stretched long at the ends, soft and teasing. I stood and went to the conference room. Today was our monthly team meeting. After reviewing the month's case summaries, a colleague asked, George, where's your wife? Why didn't she come to the meeting? I had a case I wanted to ask her about. I replied, she's busy. The colleague gave a short, oh, then quickly smiled and said, George, that case you handled last time was brilliant. I read the judgment. The wife didn't get a single advantage. Honestly, that might be the most satisfying divorce case I've seen in years. I chuckled. Yeah, that one was pretty textbook. The wife conspired with her lover to hide assets, but the court initially ruled there wasn't enough evidence. If she hadn't compromised, I doubt we would have won. Actually, in these kinds of cases, the real difficulty isn't in the legal principles, it's in the judge's leanings. If the roles were reversed and it was the husband hiding assets with a mistress, it'd be a lot easier to recover the money. So really, this might not be that useful as a reference for you. I paused for a moment and added, I'll tidy up the case files and share them in the group later. My colleague grinned. Thanks, George. I've been wanting to learn from it. Just then, Eleanor pushed the door open and walked in. She asked, learning what, honey? How come you didn't call me to the meeting? Before I could answer, the colleague laughed and said, George said you were busy. Eleanor froze for a second. The colleague then smacked his forehead and added, we're going over George's case. Actually, oh right, didn't you just take on a new divorce case yourself? You should study the materials in the group too. Who knows, maybe they'll come in handy. Eleanor hesitated and glanced at me. I smiled and said, her case is on a whole different level. Probably not applicable. Chapter 7. Marcus's case really hit a wall. What I didn't expect was that Eleanor would actually come to me for help. We'd been together for years, and it wasn't unusual for us to bounce ideas off each other. Tricky cases, ambiguous situations, that kind of thing. It was a way to pool our minds. Ever since she took on Marcus's case, we hadn't had a proper conversation in a while. She looked genuinely puzzled and said, I read the case you shared in the group the other day. That couple had basically turned into enemies. How did you manage it? How'd you get the wife to give back the hidden assets? I gave her a meaningful look and asked, why is Marcus planning to do the same? Eleanor instinctively frowned. She said, honey, why are you being like this? It's just work. If I were a doctor and the patient was my ex, would I just let them die? Besides, I did ask for your opinion beforehand. I couldn't help but laugh. Sorry, force of habit. Forgot it's your case. She didn't say anything. I thought for a moment and asked, remember the chapter, Attacking by Stratagem in the Art of War? The highest form of warfare is to win with strategy. Next is to break alliances, then to fight on the battlefield, and the worst tactic is to lay siege to a city. Divorce cases are different from others. They're born of emotion. At their core, they're a battle of feelings. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. She asked, so what you're saying is Marcus should go for psychological warfare? I smiled and said, I'm saying at the right moment, playing the emotional card might just work wonders. Eleanor seemed lost in thought. A few minutes later, she got up and went to the study. I looked out the window. The sky, which had been calm and starry moments ago, was now swept up in sudden gusts of wind. The trees rustled violently in the deepening night. A storm was coming. Then, Marcus's case suddenly progressed. Word was that his wife, Maria, had relented and agreed to pay him a considerable settlement. When he came back to the law firm, his whole face was glowing. He even sought me out, proudly declaring, Attorney, you lost. I just had a talk with my wife. She was so heartbroken, she nearly got down on her knees begging me to forgive her. She even had a massive fight with her father, demanding he pay me compensation. I couldn't help but laugh, blurting out, so, Mr. Miller's finally done kneeling? Gotta admit, once a man stops living off women, his spine gets a little straighter. He froze. Then his expression darkened as he said, there's no need for sarcasm. After all, people are different. Some people, no matter how clever they are, can only wring a few measly paychecks out of someone. But others, even when they're at their lowest, they still linger in someone's heart. Can't help it, I guess. He even shot me a scornful look before turning and walking across the hall. But things weren't going to go that smoothly. Marcus's wife, Maria, showed up at the firm out of the blue. Apparently, Marcus's emotional strategy had worked too well. Her eyes shimmered with tears as she choked out, I heard my husband hired someone here for a divorce case. I just want to see him, to talk. I want to beg him to give me another chance. We've been husband and wife. Doesn't that mean anything anymore? How can he not give me one more chance? The receptionist brought her to Eleanor's office, but the moment the door opened, Maria froze where she stood. There was Marcus, one hand resting on the back of Eleanor's chair, the other propped casually on the desk, his body curled slightly around her, half enclosing her in his arms. His lips curved into a soft smile, his gaze dripping with fondness as he stared at her profile. Eleanor appeared focused on her computer screen, but that posture, that closeness, no one would mistake that for a normal working relationship. Maria saw it instantly. Her face turned icy cold. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh and said, well, no wonder. I was wondering why this pathetic excuse for a man suddenly insisted on divorce. He used to put up with everything. Now suddenly it's, I've had enough. So, it turns out you've already found someone else? Couldn't wait any longer, could you? Chapter 8. Marcus suddenly stood up, his voice cracking in shock. What are you doing here? Maria clenched her fists so hard her knuckles turned white. Then smack. She slapped him hard across the face. She shouted, nearly hysterical, what am I doing here? Didn't you ask that nice law firm to call me? Told them I had to come sign some kind of agreement? I thought maybe I'd been too selfish in the past, that I owed you an apology. I came here hoping to win you back, to fix things between us. And what were you doing? Look me in the eyes and say it. God must have wanted me to see this. If I hadn't shown up, I never would have witnessed this lovely scene. I nearly let you scam our family out of all that money. My office was right across the hall, so I was one of the first to arrive at the heart of the drama. Other colleagues quickly followed. Eleanor's office was soon completely surrounded. Eleanor's expression had turned grim. She stood up, her cheeks burning red, and said, "Watch your mouth. This is a law firm, not a place for you to stir up trouble. If you keep making baseless accusations, I'll sue you for defamation." Marcus also regained his composure and stepped in front of Eleanor, shouting, "Maria, shut up. Not everyone is like you. You cheated during the marriage, and now you want to flip the script and accuse me of having an affair." Eleanor and I were going over the agreement details. I just leaned in because I couldn't see clearly. What right do you have to throw around slander? Colleagues began murmuring among themselves. Come on, Attorney George and Attorney Eleanor are a solid couple. His office is right across the hall, like she'd ever do something like that. Someone else added, yeah, cheating right under her husband's nose? That's a stretch. Another chimed in, besides, a lawyer hooking up with their client. That'd ruin her career. No way, just no way. Maria turned to me, suspicion still in her eyes. You're her husband? I nodded and replied firmly. We've been married for 3 years. She's always been a good wife. What you did today has seriously disrupted the operations of our firm. Once the facts are clear, I expect you to make a public apology to my wife and to this firm. Eleanor glanced up at me for a second, but quickly looked away. Maria asked, and how exactly do we get the facts? A helpful colleague immediately jumped in. Our law firm is a formal workplace. Everything's under full surveillance, no blind spots. Eleanor's expression shifted instantly. Her voice trembled. When did we install surveillance? I gave her a slow smile and said, not long ago. We upgraded the office equipment. Didn't I mention it to you? She stood frozen, face draining of color. No one told me. Why was it installed all of a sudden? I smiled again. Industry regulations. Everything needs to be compliant and transparent now, so we installed them across the board. Guess I forgot to tell you, but no worries. Now we can pull up the footage and prove your innocence. A colleague who had clearly taken initiative handed over a USB drive. Got all the surveillance footage from her office right here, he said. Gotta say, this new high-budget surveillance system was top-notch. Not only was the resolution crystal clear, it could even perform facial recognition and auto-sort clips based on detected individuals. From the day Marcus first stepped into the firm to the moments that led to this ambiguous encounter with Eleanor, everything was recorded in chronological order, frame by frame. The footage showed Marcus slumped in a chair, cigarette burning down to the filter without him even noticing. His eyes were red, voice hoarse, muttering about all the regrets and humiliation in his life, as if lamenting how far he'd fallen. Eleanor appeared visibly affected by his emotions. At some point, her eyes had welled up with tears. She wiped them away, her voice soft as she tried to comfort him. But the very next second, before she even finished her sentence, Marcus reached out and pulled her into his arms. Eleanor didn't resist. She just sat there, stunned, letting him wrap her up tightly in his embrace. Chapter 9. Marcus finally snapped out of it. In a panic, he lunged forward, trying to shut the laptop. He shouted in fury, "Stop watching. None of you are allowed to look." But in the very next moment, smack, Maria slapped him across the face again. She bit her lip and yelled, "You said there was nothing going on between you two. Then how come you were already hugging the first time you met? And you dare say she's not your mistress? Do you take me for an idiot?" But that wasn't the end of it. Suddenly, she kicked off her high heels and stormed over to Eleanor. Before Eleanor could react, the sole of the shoe came crashing down right at her face. Caught completely off guard, Eleanor was struck and knocked to the ground. Maria pounced on her, raining down slap after slap like a hailstorm. The crisp cracking sounds echoed through the room. It was a full-on assault. Eleanor didn't even have a chance to fight back. Maria screamed in rage, "You shameless, home-wrecking scum. Can't even keep your hands off each other in the office. God knows what you two have been doing outside it. Probably already screwing like rabbits. A slutty little lawyer, and you had the nerve to threaten me with a defamation lawsuit. You've got some nerve, I'll give you that. You think I'm scared? I swear I'll beat both of you to death." No one moved. Our co-workers exchanged uncertain glances, but no one dared step in. The surveillance footage was still playing. Marcus and Eleanor drinking from the same cup, Marcus draping his jacket over Eleanor's shoulders, watching a show together. There wasn't much explicit physical contact, just subtle gestures, sneaking a handhold, one-sided hugs. The most out-of-line moment was when Marcus suddenly leaned in and kissed Eleanor. She pushed him away, irritated but not exactly furious. That kind of reluctant rejection only made things look more suspicious. I overheard someone whisper, "Damn, it's actually true. Eleanor always seems so proper. Who would have thought she had such a wild side in private? Is it the thrill of doing it under her husband's nose? No wonder she insisted on taking that divorce case," said another. I thought it made more sense to give it to Attorney George. Now it all makes sense. Marcus had collapsed to his knees in front of Maria, refusing to get up. He sobbed uncontrollably, snot and tears streaming together, completely broken. Maria looked down at him, too disgusted to even slap him again. My fists were clenched tight, my body trembling. The look on my face was one of total disbelief. After a long pause, I turned stiffly on my heels and stumbled back into my office. Behind me, a colleague sighed and murmured, "Poor George. He's always been such a good guy. Kind, brilliant. Can't believe this happened to him." When people finally stepped in to break them up, Eleanor's face was swollen, with streaks of blood at the corners of her mouth. She struggled to stand and said through gritted teeth, "You hit me. I'll sue you." Maria snorted. "Go ahead. I can afford the medical bills." She scoffed. "Oh, and my family has a legal team too. I'll have them contact you." And with that, she snatched the USB drive and left. Eleanor spent the next week lying in bed at home. She winced in pain, drenched in cold sweat, but still tried to explain herself. "Honey, I didn't cheat. Please believe me. Yes, I got a little too close to Marcus, but I swear I never did anything to betray you. I just felt bad for him. He kept telling me how miserable he was, and I couldn't help it. I just felt sorry for him. I know it was wrong. Actually, I'd already made up my mind. Once I helped him finalize the divorce, I was going to cut all contact. I just didn't expect things to turn out like this. I really regret it. I'm sorry, honey. Will you? Will you still want me?" But the domino effect clearly didn't end there. The Dubois family, Maria's family, moved with startling efficiency. Within just 3 or 4 days, they'd sorted the entire flash drive, spliced every over-the-line shot together, and even dredged up an old fling the two had shared. The lawyer's letter went out, and at the very same time, a video was dumped online. Its headline screamed, "Contrasting. Fentanyl attorney willingly becomes the other woman. Another, glamorous legal beauty by day, wild cheater by night. A third, shocking, celebrity lawyer Eleanor falls for a married man. And Dry Tinder meets Raging Fire as both spouses SDRAY." The next post read, "When your husband has a lawyer yex. How I got caught in a pig butchering scam." All these years, I was left speechless. All I could say was, the rich really do play in their own league. Their legal team acted with lightning speed, and their PR unit was every bit as ruthless. Chapter 10, Eleanor's Perspective. When I received the notice for an emergency shareholders meeting, I knew it was all over. I walked into the conference room, braving everyone's strange, judgmental stares. For the first time ever, all the shareholders and senior partners were present. In the past, they always had excuses not to attend meetings, but today, every single one of them was here. I saw George sitting off to the side, his expression unreadable. Of course, George, like me, was one of the firm's partners. They didn't bother with the usual polite formalities. Instead, someone pushed a stack of documents across the table toward me. I glanced down. It was the original partner agreement I had signed, along with a notice of breach of contract. A shareholder representative spoke, his tone devoid of emotion. "Attorney Eleanor, I'm sure you've seen the viral video online. Your inappropriate conduct with a client, especially a married one, has severely violated legal ethics and professional discipline. It has caused irreparable damage to the firm's public image. As of today, you are formally expelled from the partnership. In accordance with the contract you signed, we will be pursuing legal action for damages." Instinctively, I looked up at George. He sat there calmly, as though the person being sentenced wasn't his wife, but just some stranger. I tried to read something, anything, in his eyes. Pain, sorrow, grief, even anger would have been something. But there was nothing. How could this be? It wasn't supposed to be like this. "George, Why are you looking at me with such cold eyes? A crushing wave of regret rose from deep within and swallowed me whole. When had it all started going wrong? That day at the party, when Marcus reappeared. I didn't think much of it. In fact, part of me felt contemptuous. My husband was so good to me. He was brilliant, capable, far superior to Marcus, that freeloading simp. I wasn't blind. How could I possibly be attracted to someone like him? But then, when Marcus exposed his wounds in front of everyone, pouring out his pain, I suddenly felt a strange pang of emotion. Even I didn't understand what exactly it was. But George, he picked up on it immediately. He looked at me and asked, "Eleanor, what are you upset about?" That question brought me back to my senses. I tried to pull myself back in line. Marcus sent multiple friend requests. I ignored them all. I kept reminding myself to maintain boundaries with an ex. But what I didn't expect was that Marcus would come back again. And when he forcefully pulled me into his arms, that was the moment I lost control. That day, I missed the movie I had promised to see with George, and I told George my first lie. The moment it left my lips, I felt disgusted with myself. I had become the very type of woman I used to look down on. Just another pathetic person who threw away her dignity. Marcus had broken through my mental defenses. He kept bringing up our past. He even recreated small gestures from our old relationship, as if trying to stir up long-forgotten feelings. But it had been nearly 10 years since we broke up. The things that had felt so romantic in my 20s now just felt awkward and misplaced, childish, even. Compared to George's steady, grounded love, his quiet companionship and reliability, Marcus's theatrics couldn't even come close. And the worst part was, Marcus and I both knew we were each in a marriage. There was a clear line between us, a boundary we should never have crossed. But that day, when we went down to the parking garage, in the dark stairwell landing, he suddenly pinned me against the wall and kissed me hard. I've replayed that moment in my mind countless times since. Sometimes, I even felt grateful that it happened in the stairwell and not in the office. Because if George had seen that scene, how much would it have broken him? In that moment, my mind went completely blank. By the time I realized what was happening, my body had already surrendered to instinctive desire, responding to his kiss. He was like a wild beast, holding me tight while his hands tugged at my dress. And then, George's eyes suddenly appeared in my mind, those calm, unwavering eyes, as he recited that line from The Art of War. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Next is to break alliances through diplomacy, then to fight in the field. The worst strategy is to lay siege to walled cities. I snapped awake. Without thinking, I shoved Marcus away. He stared at me in stunned silence, then finally asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" He sneered and said, "What now? You're saving yourself for your husband? Eleanor, stop pretending. If you were really so faithful, why are you even here with me?" I ran, panicked, ashamed. I fled. George once said that Marcus was my ideal lover. But there's no such thing as an ideal lover. It's like how we endlessly long for our childhood, our youth, and in old age, we reminisce over the life we once lived. But the moonlight always shines on the past. We can never return to, not on the person who came later. I kept telling myself, this has to stop before the point of no return. I had to pull back. Just wait until Marcus's case was over, then I'd cut ties completely. I'd go back to George. I'd put everything back on track. But George never gave me that chance. Why do I say it was George who didn't give me the chance? After announcing the firm's decision to punish me, the shareholders left one by one. George was the last to walk past me. Then he stopped. He pulled a sheet of paper from his folder and handed it to me. I looked down, divorce papers. He had already signed them. I let out a bitter laugh and finally asked the question that had been lodged in my heart. Chapter 11. Eleanor asked me when I had installed the surveillance cameras. I rubbed my chin and thought for a moment. I said, probably right after you rejected Marcus's friend request for the 5th time. The corners of her eyes reddened, yet a self-deprecating smile slowly emerged on her lips. She said, "George, so you never trusted me from the very beginning." I looked into her eyes and smiled. I said, "Then Eleanor, can you tell me why you didn't dare to accept Marcus's friend request?" "Yes, didn't dare." In psychology, the essence of avoidance is fear. Eleanor's fear stemmed from something she understood deep inside. Only by staying away from Marcus could she remain loyal to our marriage. But I couldn't accept that kind of conditional loyalty, nor could I guarantee that in the long years ahead, Marcus would never show up again, or some other Kevin or Nathan wouldn't appear. So I replied to Marcus's message. I chose to bring the battlefield to the front lines, fully prepared for everything to fall apart. Tears shimmered in Eleanor's eyes. She slowly lowered her head, burying her whole face in the crook of her arm, her shoulders shaking violently. I heard her choking softly. George, this is entrapment. You can't do this. I could have protected our marriage. I really could have. George, how can you be so heartless? Suddenly, she stood up and threw herself into my arms, clutching me tightly as she trembled and pleaded. Honey, can we not get divorced? I'll listen to you from now on. I swear I won't make another mistake. Please give me one more chance. And I really didn't betray you. I never slept with him. I've stayed loyal to you. Didn't we say we wanted a child? Let's have one, okay? The three of us. Let's just live a good life together. I finally couldn't hold it in anymore. With a smack, I slapped her across the face and yelled, What? Do you think I'm some pathetic loser? Do you only throw things away once they've rotted and started to stink? Sign the divorce papers or don't. Doesn't matter. Filing the lawsuit is just a formality. What came after was simple, just procedural stuff. Because of the nature of our work, Eleanor and I had signed a prenuptial agreement before marriage, keeping our finances completely separate. So when it came time to divide things, it was surprisingly straightforward. And deep down, Eleanor understood that too. She signed fairly quickly. The only asset we hadn't notarized was the marital home we lived in. I originally suggested selling it and discussing how to split the proceeds, but she chose to give it up. She said, George, it was my fault after all. Just keep it. I could never be as cold and ruthless as you. I didn't refuse. I don't turn down money. The day we picked up our divorce certificates at the Civil Affairs Bureau, she suddenly called out to me. She said, Honey, if only we hadn't gone to that party that day, wouldn't that have been great? We'd still be doing fine. 3 meals a day, for seasons a year, everything steady and simple. Maybe even a child. If only all those messy people had never shown up, how nice that would have been. I started the car. I said, There's no such thing as if. Chapter 12. After everything, my colleagues gossiped with me about what happened next. There was no doubt that Eleanor was fired from the law firm, and because the short video had gone viral, the whole industry knew about the incident. Her personal reputation was completely ruined. Not a single firm was willing to take her in. Honestly, it was understandable. Every profession values its reputation. With a history like hers, no one would risk hiring her just to have her bring disaster upon them. Later, I'd seen the penalty clause in her contract. Given the income we'd earned over the years, it wasn't exactly an amount she couldn't pay back. But now that this scandal had broken out, and she couldn't even land a job, who knows how many years it'll take for her to pay it all off, if ever. One of my colleagues sighed and said, Eleanor was actually quite capable. What a pity. How many years does it take just to study our way into this profession? And how many more years to build a client base and case history? It's all gone now. Decades of effort down the drain. Another colleague added, and that guy? He ended up even worse. I leaned in to listen. Someone scoffed and said, he was about to receive a huge settlement that day, but the Du Bois family doesn't mess around. They had someone beat the crap out of him and kicked him out of the house with nothing, literally nothing. They even stripped him naked and threw him out, left him with nothing but his boxers. Nearly froze to death. Someone else said, but honestly, the Du Bois family went easy on him. They were pissed, sure, but if they really wanted to destroy him, they could have saddled him with a pile of debt. The fact that he walked away without that was already merciful. I thought for a moment and said, well, now they're both single. Guess nothing's in their way anymore. Everyone burst into louder laughter. One of them said, George, you don't know the half of it, do you? Eleanor actually went looking for Marcus afterward. She said it was his fault for dragging her into this mess and demanded he compensate her losses or she'd sue him. Marcus was already barely hanging on, and when he heard that, he was so mad his nose almost twisted off his face. He looked like a demon that day, slapped her right across the face and yelled at her for being trash and trying to pass the blame. Eleanor was stunned, hair all messy, looked like a total lunatic. It was a total catfight, ugly as hell. I actually got a video of that day, secret recording. George, want to see it? I couldn't help teasing him. You're following them closer than I am. He waved me off and said, come on, life's already hard enough. If there's free drama, why not enjoy the show? For a second, I felt like he actually made a fair point. So I chuckled and said, then how about a free feast tonight? You in? He let out a cheer and immediately ran into the office. George is treating us to a big dinner tonight. No slowpokes allowed.